Hi, Wilson Middle School families. This is Amanda Schaus, the Director of Student Services, here to talk to you about Wilson Middle School being identified as a target district in need of improvement. Many of you received the email from Mr. Benton yesterday. I apologize for the dog in the background, but this is the world we're in right now, so we are going to have some interruptions. But many of you received the email from Mr. Benton that included the surveys for both parents and students regarding they're called a needs assessment that look at, how you feel about the school overall, how it serves your students, how it serves your children, and how the students feel about school in general. So I appreciate all of the feedback that we've already received from parents and students, and you'll have until the 7th to complete those. And those surveys will help us in our process of being identified as a target district. And today I want to take some time to explain that to you, what that means, and how that benefits our district in a way that we can start looking closely at how we can make improvements, and then how we can ultimately no longer be identified as a target district and use the growth that we've made to continue to benefit students in the future. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that the team that we made and put together are going to be working on. So the major things that we have to look at when New York State identified Wilson Middle School as being a school that needed to improve in specific areas were the accountability system in general, the indicators that we are identified as needing to work on, specifically what performance levels we need to focus on, and how do we build on what we currently really do well to continue to make growth in those areas, as well as improve in the areas that were found by the data to have weaknesses in. So what is the accountability system? The federal government has a system called Every Student Succeeds Act. That is a K through 12 education law that is governed through the whole United States. And that ESSA fund, that federal law, provides funding through the United States Department of Education and helps districts improve all student outcomes. And it's been used for many years. It looks at subgroups, whole groups, it looks at state averages and progress, it looks at attendance, it looks at a lot of different indicators, but that funding comes to each state, and then the state divvies that out based on accountability. New York State receives $1.6 billion of ESSA funding, and then each district applies for those grants and that funding every year. Our district historically has used that funding to support our AIS services, our academic intervention support services for our struggling learners in ELA and math. We've begun to use some of that funding for extensions that all of your students currently have on their Chromebooks to assist with reading, writing, and math. And then we also use that funding also for any students and families that may become homeless, or any students that are endangered. We also use some of that funding to mentor new teachers and also for equipment for at-risk students. In exchange for funding, states have to make sure that we are held accountable. So if we get this money, we have to show that we are using the money appropriately and that students are also benefiting from the funds. So they use the accountability system, and there are certain measures that we use, and those measures are test scores. I've always been test scores, the 3 through 8 test scores, and also Regents exams. And I'll also show you some other indicators that they use. So the two ways that schools are identified are either through a comprehensive support an improvement school, a CSI, or a targeted support and improvement school, a TSI. Wilson has been identified as a TSI. A CSI is a school, it's the 5% of all schools in the state, the lowest scores, the lowest performing schools. We have not been identified as a CSI. We have been identified as a TSI, which means that we just have a few subgroups that need to make some improvements. And so we are going to work diligently in those subgroups to make improvements based on the data that we have and also the information that we get from the surveys that you guys are completing. So the accountability system works like this. In a visual, it's much easier. So based on the data that we received in 2018-2019. Now, this gets a little technical, but the data in 2018-2019 was based on the test scores from 2017-2018. It gets a little technical, I know, but that's why you have us to read the data for you. But when we get that data, we analyze it, the state analyzes it, and they determine levels that we're at, 1 through 4. If we do well in those indicators on those tests, we are either identified as being a district in good standing or a district that might need to be targeted for improvement. If we're doing really poorly, we're identified as a CSI, comprehensive support school, or a targeted support school. Targeted support schools are looked at annually, and comprehensive support schools remain in that for 3 years. So we've been identified as a targeted support school, and we will have to work on this yearly. We can exit this if our scores improve or data shows we've improved or we've shown measures of improvement. So with accountability comes educational equity. So what does that mean? Educational equity means all students succeed and thrive in school no matter who they are, where they live, or where they go to school. Also, accountability is everyone's responsibility. We should celebrate what we do well and recognize and work on what we need to improve, identifying things that may be difficult, knowing that we need to make choices to make improvements in those areas. Being identified as a targeted school means that we get extra help to assist us in making those improvements. So even though it may be discouraging that we've been identified as a targeted school, it also means that we get a little bit of assistance to make improvements. And there is a federal grant that we will apply for in order to get some funding in order to help support some of the initiatives that we'll put into place that the team will work on. And some of your surveys will help us identify things that we really need to focus on. So there are multiple measures of performance that the state looks at that identify a school if they are a TSI or a CSI. They look at student achievement, academic achievement. They look at the growth that schools have made. So, they might be high achieving schools, but they haven't made much growth. That could identify a school. They could also be a school that has normal achievement and stagnant growth. They could be a school that has always had poor achievement and has made significant growth. Those are all things they look at. They also look at academic progress. So they will set a goal for a district that they need to make so much progress in their English language arts testing within a certain number of years. And, the school works toward those goals. And we see performance indicators in those areas. They look at English language proficiency, and they look at chronic absenteeism. And so they measure all of these indicators with all students, so we get a breakdown for all students, and then they also break that down into subgroups. So they look at race, ethnicity, students with disabilities, and our English language learners. It's a lot of information, but they break it down nicely for us with data. They also look at our success. So they look at our, like I was talking about, our student achievement, how well students are doing in the English language arts, math, sciences, and also how they're doing on state assessments in high school. Their growth, their progress. They also look in high school at graduation rate. They look for our measures of 4-, 5-, and 6-year cohort graduation rates. That's a long-term measure of growth. They look at our English language learners and how they do on the New York State English as a Second Language Achievement Test. They look at our attendance. They look at students who miss 10% or more of the school year over a long-term period. And then they also measure the high school's college and career and civic readiness. So what was the middle school identified as needing improvement in? So there were 3 areas that we were identified as needing to work on. The first one was a subgroup. They wanted us to focus, based on the 17-18 data, on our students with disabilities. In particular, they wanted us to focus on academic growth and achievement. On another slide, I'm going to show you some good news in that area. They also wanted us to focus on chronic absenteeism for all students. That's not a subgroup. All of our students showed 10% or more chronic absenteeism, so that's something we want to try and improve, or definitely improve. And the last thing was test participation in 3 through 8 assessments, as well as our Regents assessments. Our Regents assessment participation is great. We do have some 8th graders that have really good participation, but mainly focusing on our 6 through 8 test participation. Also, some really good news that I'd like to share about that. So, in regards to test participation, in 2017-2018, remember I said that was what we were looking at as far as the data that was collected to identify us as a targeted district. We had about 50% participation in New York State testing. Parents were still weary about students participating. We had a high opt-out rate. It was, in many districts, this was a significant issue of participation. In 2018 and 2019, Wilson worked diligently to increase student participation in New York State testing. This was a huge push by the middle school, and they had amazing results. Increasing participation from 52% to 67% in 1 year is a significant increase. And the result of that is that the performance level of students with disabilities increased significantly. They went from a level 1 performance to a level 2. So even though we were identified, the students with disabilities subgroup was identified as needing to improve, we've already been able to show improvement in that area. We just need to continue to support that subgroup. So one of the areas that we've already been identified as needing to improve, we've made great strides. We just want to be able to show that we can continue to make improvements in those areas. So that's some good news. We want to focus on chronic absenteeism. That is something that's been identified as an area of weakness. And of course, with this year, with COVID-19 and hybrid learning and distance learning, that is definitely an area that the whole district has said that they want to focus on and support students overall. So we welcome that challenge and know that we need to support students and their attendance in school. So what is required of us at the middle school as an identified TSI school to complete this process? The very first thing is the needs assessment that has been given to all parents and households in the middle school, all staff in the middle school, and all students in the middle school. Those needs assessments people have already started to do. They're rolling in, and I am so pleased with how much response that we've gotten already and really appreciate the participation. Once we get those in, the deadline is the 7th. We're going to review the data and look specifically at how our school can start to build our improvement plan based on the responses we've received and the 3 indicators that we need to focus on. We're going to continue to do these annual surveys to make sure that we still continue to focus on the areas of concern and areas of strength that the parents, staff, and students give us, the information that you provide. We are going to develop, in consultation with parents, school staff, secondary staff, students, everyone, we're going to develop something called a SCEP, a School Comprehensive Education Plan. At the TSI level, at the targeted school level, this does not have to be approved by the state. This is an internal education plan that we will create, share with the building, staff, parents, school, and ultimately have approved by the Board of Education. We're going to identify school-wide evidence-based interventions that we will incorporate into that plan and that we'll implement, that we know will best meet the needs of our students. We will take steps to increase parent and student participation in these decision-making processes, and we will also apply for the grant for federal school improvement funds to support all of these efforts that we plan to move forward with. The last question is, how do you exit the TSI status? All right, so it's important to recognize that we have the targeted district status, but it's also important to look at how do we move out of it. After we've worked hard to make improvements, how do we reflect that improvement and show the state that we've worked hard to do this? So in order to do that, it takes 2 consecutive years for a school to show that they've moved their levels up above the targeted level of level 1. So Wilson Middle School can exit the targeted school status if for 2019-20 and 2021-22 school years they've showed that their composite performance level, all these data levels, and their student growth levels have moved to 2 or higher. Remember I said the good news is one of our subgroups, the Students with Disability subgroup, has already made that growth for 1 year. So we need to keep moving higher. The other point is that we need to make sure that our other subgroups continue to maintain their good standing. We need to focus on chronic absenteeism because that is one level indicator that does show deficiency. And we need to be able to exhibit that we can maintain all of those levels in the 2021-2022 school year. In order to do all of those things, we need to implement the recommendations of the committee, the team that has been made up of special ed teachers, general ed teachers, parents, students, multidisciplinary teams, and we met last week, and we're going to continue to meet throughout this process and share information with you as it becomes available. So I thank you for your time tonight. I know I threw a lot at you, but I will be sharing more presentations. I'm also going to be sharing a Google form that will allow you to ask questions, dive in and get more information if you'd like some. And again, you can always email me at ashouse@wilsoncsd.org, or you can also email Scott Benton, the middle school principal, at sbenton@wilsoncsd.org. So this is just sort of the intro to everything, but you'll be hearing from myself and Scott much more in the year, throughout the year, and from the team as we work on our growth plan and implement some of the exciting things that we will be working on this year. Thank you for your time, and have a wonderful evening.